Elena Carter and her young son Noah are stalked in a suburban store by two mysterious men, who are later revealed to be working for her obsessive ex-brother-in-law, Richard Hale. Investigators uncover Richard's disturbing history of targeting children, aided by Elena's former friend Lauren, and discover a basement filled with photos of multiple children, including Noah, labeled "Mine." With a coordinated police operation, Richard and Lauren are captured, Noah is saved, and while Elena and her son are safe, the investigation hints at a wider network of endangered children. Please comment where you are watching us from and don't forget to click subscribe and turn on notifications. It started as a normal shopping trip, a mother and her 7-year-old son wandering through the aisles of a local store on a Saturday afternoon. To them, it was routine. Familiar. Ordinary. But sometimes the most ordinary days hide the darkest secrets. Because when investigators later reviewed the security cameras inside that store, what they found shocked even the most seasoned detectives. The mother wasn't imagining things. She was being followed. But not by just one stranger. And what those strangers were planning was far worse than anyone could have believed. Elena Carter wasn't the type of woman who sought out drama. She was a single mother, living in the quiet suburb of Brookdale. At just 31, life had already thrown her more than her share of hardships. Her husband had left when Noah, their only child, was still a toddler. Since then, Elena carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, working 2 jobs, balancing bills, sacrificing everything for her little boy. And if you asked her, she would have told you Noah was worth every sleepless night, every extra shift, every dollar stretched until it tore. On that Saturday, Elena promised Noah a small treat after a tough week at school. He had just finished his spelling test, and he had begged her, "Can we go to the store, Mommy? Just for a toy?" And how could she say no? So she loaded Noah into their old sedan and drove to Brookdale Market, a mid-sized department store with everything under one roof. Fluorescent lights, tiled floors, shelves stacked high. A place where the most dangerous thing you'd expect was slipping on a wet floor. But that day, Brookdale Market would become the setting of something far darker. Something Elena could never have imagined. She grabbed a shopping cart, Noah bouncing beside her. They started with groceries, then turned toward the toy aisle. Everything felt normal, at first. But as Elena later told investigators, she noticed something small, something so ordinary it was easy to dismiss. A man. Standing at the end of the cereal aisle, pretending to look at boxes on the shelf. Dark jacket, cap pulled low. She thought nothing of it, until she turned down another aisle. And there he was again. She quickened her pace, Noah chattering happily, unaware. Another aisle. Another glance over her shoulder. The man was still there. Always behind. Never closer than a few steps. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But then, she saw his hands. He wasn't holding a basket. He wasn't pushing a cart. He wasn't shopping at all. Elena's chest tightened. She gripped Noah's hand harder, pulling him closer. She told herself not to panic. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But when she paused pretending to compare prices on a can of soup, the man paused too. And when she moved again, pushing her cart down the aisle, he reached into his pocket, and pulled out a phone. Not to text. Not to call. But to hold it up. Pointing it directly at her little boy. Elena's stomach dropped. Her instincts screamed. Every muscle in her body told her, something is wrong. But she didn't want to frighten Noah. She whispered, "Stay close to me, okay?" He nodded, still clutching a small toy car he'd found. Elena turned toward the front of the store, deciding she'd had enough. But when she reached the checkout lanes, her heart nearly stopped. The man was already there. Waiting. Watching. As though he knew she would have to walk past him to leave. Later, when security reviewed the tapes, they saw everything Elena had described. They watched her cart weaving through aisles, Noah at her side. They saw the man trailing her every move. But then they noticed something Elena hadn't seen. Because in the far corner of the footage, just barely in frame, another figure appeared. This one in a gray hoodie, his face partially obscured. He never walked too close. Never too far. But his movements mirrored Elena's path almost perfectly. She wasn't just being followed by one man. She was being hunted by two. Elena finally paid for her items, her hands trembling as she fumbled with her wallet. She forced a smile at the cashier, trying to mask her fear. She told herself, once we get to the car, it'll be fine. Just get to the car. But as the sliding doors opened and the afternoon air hit her face, her heart dropped. The man in the jacket stepped outside too. And so did the one in the hoodie. They weren't leaving with purchases. They weren't leaving at all. They were waiting. Security footage from outside the store would later show what happened next. Elena walking quickly, Noah clinging to her hand. The strangers splitting, one heading left, one right. Flanking her. Like predators circling their prey. Investigators studying the footage would later freeze frame one moment in particular. The man in the hoodie pulled something from his pocket. Not a phone. Not keys. Something else. Something long. Something metallic. But the cameras weren't clear enough to show exactly what it was. Elena felt it before she saw it, that raw instinct only a parent knows. She abandoned the cart. She lifted Noah into her arms and ran. Not to her car, not to the exit. But back inside. Straight to customer service. Her voice cracked as she begged the clerk, call security. Please. Someone is following us. And in that moment, everything shifted. Because for the first time, the men realized they had been noticed. When store security rushed to the entrance, the strangers didn't run. They didn't shout. Instead, they smiled. And one of them said something that still haunts the employees who heard it. Something so chilling, the clerk later admitted she couldn't sleep for days. He looked at Elena, then at Noah, and said, "We've been waiting for you." The men left calmly before police could arrive. And when investigators began piecing together who they were, and why they had been following Elena and her son, they uncovered a secret that stretched far beyond Brookdale Market. This wasn't just about a random encounter. It wasn't just about two men in a store. It was something bigger. Something organized. And Elena and her son had stumbled right into the middle of it. When security intervened, the men didn't run. They didn't panic. Instead, they calmly looked Elena in the eye and said something that chilled everyone to the bone, "We've been waiting for you." But what did that mean? Why her? Why Noah? As investigators began digging deeper, they uncovered something that transformed this from a simple case of harassment into the beginning of one of the darkest mysteries Brookdale had ever seen. Within minutes of Elena's frantic call, local police arrived at Brookdale Market. Officers swept through the aisles, combed the parking lot, but the strangers were gone. Elena clutched Noah tightly as she gave her statement. Her voice shook, her hands trembling, but her details were sharp: dark jacket, cap pulled low, average build. The second hoodie, taller, something metallic in his hand. Officers reassured her, promising to review the footage. But behind closed doors, they admitted something troubling. These men hadn't fled like amateurs. They had walked calmly, deliberately, as though they knew exactly how much time they had before police arrived. And that detail set off alarm bells. Back at the station, detectives studied the footage frame by frame. It wasn't long before one of them froze on the screen. Because they recognized the man in the dark jacket. He had been seen before. Just 3 months earlier, he had been reported loitering near another shopping center, this time following a different mother with a small child. That woman, too, had felt uneasy. She'd called the police, but by the time officers arrived, the man had disappeared. And her case had quietly gone cold. Now, it was resurfacing. The same man. The same pattern. But why? What was he looking for? Meanwhile, Elena tried to return to normal life. But how could she? She found herself double-locking doors. Checking windows 3, 4, 5 times before bed. At night, she swore she heard footsteps outside. A car idling too long near her street. And Noah, he had nightmares. He would wake up crying, saying, "Mommy, the man with the phone is here." Elena tried to reassure him, but deep down, she wasn't sure she believed her own words. Detectives didn't stop with the man's prior report. They dug into both suspects, cross-referencing faces against databases. And soon, they uncovered something chilling. The second man in the hoodie had also been seen before. Not just in Brookdale, but in 2 neighboring towns. Always near shopping centers. Always where mothers with young children gather. And always, disappearing before police arrived. It was too consistent to be a coincidence. But there was one more connection that made detectives' blood run cold, because in one of those towns, a child had gone missing. Her name was Ava Reynolds. Just 8 years old. One summer afternoon, Ava vanished outside a grocery store while waiting for her mother. Cameras had caught 2 blurred figures in the parking lot. One in a dark jacket. One in a hoodie. The case had gone unsolved for nearly a year. Until now. Because when Brookdale detectives compared the footage from Ava's disappearance to the tapes from Brookdale Market, they saw the same 2 men. This wasn't random. It wasn't a chance. It was a pattern. A deliberate, coordinated stalking of mothers and their children. And Elena and Noah had almost become their next victims. Detectives eventually sat Elena down and told her what they had found. She listened in silence, her hands shaking. When they told her about Ava Reynolds, she broke down, clutching Noah tightly, whispering over and over, "I can't lose you. I can't lose you." The realization hit her like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a scare. It was a network. A system. And the men weren't just following her. They were choosing her. But here's where things took a darker turn. Investigators went back to the exterior footage of Brookdale Market the moment Elena ran back inside. At first, they focused on the 2 men. But then a detective noticed something else. Parked 3 rows back in the lot, was a van. Dark-colored. No plates visible. And as Elena sprinted back through the sliding doors with Noah in her arms, the van's headlights flicked on. As though someone inside was waiting for a signal that never came. When word leaked of what the footage revealed, Brookdale erupted in fear. Parents stopped bringing children shopping. Community meetings turned heated. Who were these men? What was the van for? And most terrifying of all, how many other children had they been watching? Detectives now believed this wasn't just 2 men acting alone. The van suggested something organized. Something bigger. And when they traced a partial plate number from the blurry footage, it led them to a name. A name tied to more than one missing child case across 3 different states. A name Elena had heard before, but never thought she would hear again. And when the police told her who it was, her entire world came crashing down. But it wasn't until they traced a van seen outside Brookdale Market that the case took its most chilling turn yet. Because the name tied to that van wasn't just connected to missing children in other states. It was a name Elena recognized. A name from her own past. And when detectives told her, the ground beneath her life shifted forever. The partial plate on the van came back to a man named Richard Hale. To most, the name meant nothing. But to Elena, it froze her blood. Richard Hale wasn't a stranger. He was her ex-husband's brother. Noah's uncle, a man she hadn't seen or wanted to see in nearly 8 years. Back when Elena was married, Richard had always made her uneasy. He was older, rough around the edges, always showing up uninvited, always lingering too long when he looked at Noah, even as a toddler. She remembered how her ex brushed it off, "That's just Richard. He's weird, but harmless." But Elena never believed that. When her marriage fell apart, she cut ties with the entire Hale family, vowing to keep Noah away from that toxic environment. For years, she thought she'd succeeded. Until now. Detectives laid it out, the two men in the store. They weren't random stalkers. They were working for Richard Hale. The van outside wasn't a coincidence. It was part of a plan. And when Richard realized Elena had returned to Brookdale Market, a place he knew she sometimes shopped, he sent his men inside to follow her. But the bigger question was, why? Why would Richard, after all these years, want to target Noah? The answer would unravel everything Elena thought she knew about her past. Detectives dug into Richard's background. What they found was unsettling. For years, he had been investigated quietly in multiple states, always in connection to missing children. Always slipping away before charges could be filed. And his obsession wasn't random. It was personal. He believed Noah belonged to him. When detectives told her, Elena felt the room spin. She clutched Noah's hand, whispering, "You're mine. You're mine." But Richard's twisted belief went back years. He had once told Elena, after a heated family argument, "If my brother won't be a real father to that boy, I will." At the time, she dismissed it as drunken rambling. Now, she realized it had been a warning. And the men in the store had been sent to carry it out. Detectives went back to the footage one last time, studying every frame. This time, they noticed something new. The man in the hoodie, the one trailing Elena from a distance, had briefly pulled down his hood near the exit. His face was visible for just a second. Enough for detectives to identify him. He wasn't just some hired drifter. He was a registered offender. Someone with a history of abducting minors. And he had been working directly under Richard Hale. When the truth came out, Brookdale was shaken. This wasn't random. It wasn't a coincidence. It was organized. And the person orchestrating it wasn't a nameless predator, but someone tied to Elena's own family. Someone who had once held Noah as a baby. Someone who believed he was entitled to him. But here's where the case took an even darker turn. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Richard's property. And what they found went far beyond Elena and Noah. In his basement, walls were covered with photographs. Dozens of children. Different towns. Different stores. Each one labeled. Each one marked with dates. And in the center, taped higher than all the rest, it was a photo of Noah. With a single word scrawled beneath it. Mine. Richard Hale wasn't just watching Noah. He had been planning this for years. And detectives feared he might already have other children hidden somewhere. The case was no longer about just protecting Elena and her son. It was about finding out how many lives Richard Hale had destroyed, and whether some of those children could still be saved. In part 2, we'll uncover what investigators discovered when they followed Richard's trail across state lines, and the shocking rescue that changed everything. Please click subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.